about this company, which at the time was about $500,000 in business. And he shared, sort of the products and how they went to market. And I thought it was really a super cool company, super cool concept with an unlimited potential. And I sort of had in the back of my mind that this could be $100 million company. And so he took a shot on me. I was fresh out of business school, didn't have a lot of management experience outside of the Army, and took a chance. And together we really did some pretty cool things in the business. We've been able to grow that business over the last 23 years now. We've acquired 6 companies along the way. We've sold the company twice, and somehow I'm like that bad penny that keeps turning up, and I stay with the organization. So it's been an awesome ride. When I started with Deskcase back in '97, we were 3 full-time employees and 600,000 of trailing 12-month revenue, and today we got 100 employees in 9 countries, and we have over 30 million in revenue. And it's been truly been an outstanding journey. And I suspect that the company will sell again in the next 2 to 3 years, as is the case with private equity owned businesses. So it's been a fun journey. And we got to recruit Marcus at one step along the way. He was sort of he was my long-term retirement plan, and then he stepped out of business and kind of screwed all my plans up. So notwithstanding, I had to kind of soldier on for a little while longer. And so
it sounds like it's been a really rough road. So I apologize for derailing your career, Brian. I'm really sorry about that.
Anything bad is your fault. Anything good is Jody's.
It's Jody's, yeah, Jody. That's awesome. Well, we get to see you at what could be considered the peak of your career, right? And you may say something different of that. However, the company's doing well; it's continuing to grow. What did we not see at the beginning of your career, or the work behind the scenes that you feel is important for people to understand or know about the journey?
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark, as I thought a little bit about that. And I would say probably one of the things both in the military and in business that I think is important, it came from this, and I'll not be able to cite the source, but there was an article in some business magazine 30 years ago, and it was this woman, Latino woman, who had started a taco business, and she'd grown the business to be about 3 million, which back in the 80s to me seemed like an awful big business. And somebody asked her, what do you think has made you successful? And one of the things she said in that article, which stuck with me and always has, is I've never believed I'm too good to do any job in this company. And so I think one of the things I think that gives some credibility in an organization is if the people around you recognize that's the COVID-19 environment where there's dogs and
oh, it happens every time. Yeah, we're used to that.
There's everything. So I think if the people around you recognize that you're willing to step in and do anything to help the business succeed, I think that builds a lot of credibility. And I've tried, even as the business has changed, to make sure that I go out, and even in about 6 months ago, I went out onto the line and just started labeling product alongside, one of the, and some of the folks who haven't been with the organization kind of scratch their head and say, what in the world is this guy doing out here labeling product? And I think sometimes especially if I'm having a bad day, I try to anchor to something positive, and the people that I work with tend to be very positive. And so I got to do something like that. And it helps me feel, it's a little self-serving, right? It shows them that I'm willing to do different things in the organization, and it anchors me back to something positive, especially when things are not, going well, and sometimes they don't. So,
I like that, and I've seen you do that. And I think you're only telling half the story there, because I've seen you on the line, and I got to say that's not the skill set that I think is your powerful suit. I wonder how many mislabeled units happened during that 30-minute span.
Well, it all depends on when in the shift it happens. If it's early in the shift, I'm pretty good. Late in the shift, not so much.
Well, I love it. I asked you at one point, I asked you at one point what motivates you on a daily basis. And your answer was really simple. Do you remember what you told me?
It's probably something to do about accomplishing goals or winning or something like that.
Yeah, when well that day it was a very busy day. We had gotten some news. I remember it vividly because it was one of the pivotal points in my career. And just the mindset shift that you gave me. And you looked at me, it was just plain as day. Marcus, it's not about how many breathers that we sell. It's not about a number on the board. It's about winning. It's about doing better the next day, doing better than we did last year, last month, yesterday, whatever it is. It's about winning. And is that still your driver?
It is. I think over the years, I've come to define winning a little differently than maybe even in the last few years. Um, so I think I'll give you an example of when it started for me. I took this job when I was in between jobs and moving back after the military, selling shoes in a sporting goods store. And there was a new owner in, and they had this company meeting, and her name's Pat Shea. She says, "Any questions?" I said, "Yeah. How many shoes did we sell today?" And she was kind of a business owner that didn't really want to share any information with people. And she said, "Well, why in the world do you need to know that?" I said, "Well, if I don't know how many we sold today, I don't know how many we're going to sell tomorrow to beat it." And light bulb went out for her, and she said, "Oh, well, this is how many pair we sold." And so now she realized that maybe I was a and so early on, it really was about how do we beat yesterday? How do we become better tomorrow? And I think that as I get later in my career, it's more about helping other people to accomplish things that they want to accomplish. And so as a private equity owned business, where private equity comes alongside you and puts some pretty interesting and challenging incentives in front of you and your team. For me, it became, in the last 5 years, it's become less about me winning and more about enabling other people in our organization to win, however they define that. So I think that that's been still about winning, but I think about it a little bit differently today than I did 5 years ago. It's probably because I'm late in my career and I could get kicked out at any minute.
Well, I think it's cool that you say that because one of the things that we have literally hanging on our wall is success through others, right? And together we all achieve more, right? If we're focused on what is, and I'm gonna mess this up a little bit, the Zig Ziglar quote, you'll get everything you want out of life the minute that you pour into some help me out tabs, or Brian, I'm sure y'all know this one.
You help somebody else get what they want or something.
Yeah. Essentially help other people, and then you'll finally get that fulfillment. So it sounds like that's where you are for sure. You run, I love that you said that. You run a global company, right? You said 9 countries.
We do, yeah.
Okay. 9 countries. Some of us here are working our tail ends off, consistently, or sometimes in so much in the weeds, we can't even see, where we're going next, on a multi-county business. Right. And as we're going through that, we're looking to balance that, in the work life and the motivation with regular personal life. That's a big thing, right? So we've talked about these wins and we've talked about what motivates you. What are some best practices or things that you do daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it may be, to make sure that you and Jody, like, that's your foundation, like y'all are good, that the personal life is checked, and like everything's moving forward in all aspects in life?
Yeah. Well, I think it's something about working at it each day, right? Because it's not. There's a couple things that I do. I have a coach. I've had a coach the last couple of years, and that coach helps me to try to focus on sort of tools and tactics that allow me to make sure that my work-life balance. And I would say before I get there, that there's not a lot of difference in running a multi-county practice and running a multi-country practice. It's the difference is travel. For me to visit with colleagues in Europe or Asia, it just takes longer to get there. But the challenges are the same: the communication and the cadence, and being So my mantra is to be open, present, and thoughtful in every engagement, so that, so I try to transition to, and that applies not to just dealing with, the cultural differences between somebody who lives in Holland or somebody who lives in France or somebody that lives in Brazil or Colombia. I mean, that doesn't really matter if you sort of meet that person where they're at in a way that's open, present, and thoughtful. And so a couple of things I try to do before every engagement is to sort of transition into it and think about who it is I'm going to engage with and how I want to show up for that. And if I anchor to that, then I tend to, and by the way, I allow my executive team to hold me accountable to that. So if I'm in a meeting and I space out, they have every right to say, hey Gleason, we're here, and there have been times in meetings where I have to sort of raise my hand and say, Stephanie, I apologize. I completely lost track. I was not here. Can you, and so I think, sort of, making sure that I'm transitioning to each of those engagements, including, and Marcus, what I'm about to say, you'll chuckle at, right? Before COVID, when you would finish the 70-minute or 80-minute commute home from Goodlettsville to South Nashville,
right?
And you're sort of not in a good frame of mind, making sure that you transition to that engagement that I'm going to have when I walk in the door, and so I work on that. And how do I? And for me, it's to put, before I get in, put a little Coldplay on, a little chill Coldplay, and sort of take it down a notch and leave the rest of it behind, whether it's the commute or whatever good or bad happened in the business that day. So
yeah, I love it. When you are at home, and this is more just like a best practice, because we have husband and wife teams, and this wasn't on the itinerary, so forgive me for asking one that's a little bit off. We have husband and wife teams. We have husband and wives that one's an agent, one may not be. And do you talk work at home? Is that something you avoid?
Yeah. No, Jody, I mean, so good or bad, Jody will always tell me what she thinks about what's going on in our business. And I don't always agree with her, but I always value her opinion. So, she's been a big part of the success of our business over the years, even though she's never been an employee of the business. She's, there are times where, because of where we've landed, that we kind of pinch ourselves and figure out how this happened to us, because but it did. And and she'll say, well, it's something you did. I said, it's not at all. It's something that we created together. And so I think that even in a husband-wife team in your world, I think the best, most successful teams are those that approach it that way, that they are partners, independent of whether they work together or don't work together. And I would say that probably the times I'm at my best at work is when things are really are good at home. And when I'm at my worst at work is where I've had a fight with Jody and I'm not in the right frame of mind. So I never underestimate the power of that partnership. And even though she's not in the business, she's been an integral part of its success.
I love that. I
don't know if she can hear. We office together now during this COVID period. We're both working at home, and so she hears parts of conversations, and so.
And I didn't tell Brian this, guys. However, just a little feedback. Jody's pretty much the smartest human being alive when it comes to numbers. And I tried to get her today. However, she was booked. So we had to settle for Brian.
Yeah. You got the raw end of that deal.
As a leader, you're constantly pouring into others, teammates, even customers. And like you just said, it's making sure that you are, I love that, open, present, and thoughtful. When you're pouring in and pouring in and pouring in, how do you fill your bucket back up?
Yeah, it's funny, Marcus, and probably Zig Ziglar would say this too. And I think when you pour into somebody else or you help somebody else in their career, it almost, you don't have to refill the bucket, because in that investing in somebody else, there's a self-serving component to that, which is you feel good about helping that person. And so I think it's almost like the only way that you fill the bucket back up is to continue to invest in other people. Because I mean, it's so funny because I think it was Ben Franklin said, when we do good, we feel good. And when we do bad, we feel bad, or something trite like that. But it's true. I mean, it's if you can help somebody else out, it really, that is what fills the bucket back up. For me anyways.
I love it. I love it. I remember, is it your nephew? He came and he was with you for a little vacation time or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And we all went out to eat, and his nephew was like, they don't sleep. I don't know how they do this. Like they go to bed late. They're up at like 4 a.m. They work out. They do all these things. How do you keep your energy so high?
Yeah, poor Alex. He did. He spent 2 weeks with us. He interned in the business, and it was for a teenager that maybe was a bit too much to ask for. We don't have teenagers. We don't have children of our own, so I can't speak to that. But I think we probably put him in a pretty uncomfortable position, and maybe unfairly so. No, I think I will tell you, Marcus. I think this COVID thing has been. For my morning and my exercise routines actually been good. Mm-hmm. Because I probably sleep a little more than I did 15 years ago. But we do try to work out in the morning. And I think without the commute in, that 45 minutes to an hour, it really frees up a morning to, whether it's to do the bike or do sauna or do strength training or something. And so I do try to do that, but I'm not I think, Marcus, I once asked you about bodybuilding or something. You sent me this big boy arms day or something like that. and I said, I'm not sure that I don't think I'm cut out for this. But we do try to stay active. During the summer, we spend a lot of time at the lake, and there's biking and surfing and golfing and walking. And
yeah. Well, I told everybody how humble you are, right, before we got here. So when Brian says we try to work out in the mornings and, we stay active, it wasn't too long ago, my friend, that y'all were doing triathlons, all right, and sprint triathlons. So when he says something like that, don't think that he's taking a leisurely stroll through the neighborhood.
It has been more of that lately. Although there's talk in the family about training for an Ironman sometime for the next couple of years. So we may have to sort of step our game up a bit in the next.
Okay. Well, I will make sure to change your name in my phone to ignore call because I am not the Ironman caliber right there.
You don't know that, Marcus. You don't know until you try.
Yeah, it's true, Brian. And I break something. All right, moving on. As you've gone throughout your career, man, what's changed about your morning routine to ensure that you start your day off right?
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I think again, COVID has changed everything, and so I usually now get up with the dogs about 4. I feed the dogs, and if I have a flight lesson early, then I stay up. But if I don't, then I go back to bed till about 6:30, and it's glorious. And then I can get up and I can work out and still be on a 7:15 call, and for sure on our all company stand up at 8:30. So my morning routine has changed a little bit in the last 8 to 12 weeks, and I'm candidly really happy that it did. It's one of the very few positive things that's come out of this crisis.
Yeah. Is there something that you always want to check the box in the morning? And I'll say that to say this. We have an entire team that is dedicated to a morning energy plan. It involves, meditation, working out, hydration, prayer, things of that nature. Yeah. Is there anything as far as like 1, 2, 3 items that you're like, then if I do these things, I'm off and running, it feels great?
Yeah, no, if I, and I'm not consistent, by the way, in this, but if I make sure that I exercise before my first call of the day, I tend to show up far more energetic. Whether that's just to do push-ups, crunches, and curls, or whether it's to ride the exercise bike and sit in the sauna. It's either way I tend to, and there are weeks I'll go where I'm really consistent about it, and then there's weeks I go where I'm not at all consistent about it. So
yeah, well, okay, so I'll dig in a little bit there, because we have a lot of people that maybe they don't give themselves enough grace when you miss a day, right, or get a little off that schedule. Does it ever get in your head like, oh, I'm not doing things right? Or do you just stay positive and just say, you know what, tomorrow let me get back on the horse and we'll start riding again?
yeah, I think you're onto something, right? It's trends, right? If I go a couple days, I don't sort of, I can sort of let that go. If I go a week or longer, then I can become frustrated with myself, and then sort of, but then it's just a recommit thing. But I as I get older, I think less about the beating myself up side. I think for me, it's less about the exercise and more about, I'll beat myself up more about a diet than I will exercise. If I'm not eating well, then I don't have, then I have the wrong kind of energy to begin with, which is not productive, and it makes me less likely to want to work out. And so I try to focus more on trying to avoid trends or spirals of, poor eating, poor exercise leads to poor eating and poor exercise. And then try to stop that before it gets there. I've been pretty good for the last probably 18 months. I've been fairly consistent. So so I'm encouraged by that.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna shift us back into the business world for a minute. We have a lot of people here. We're honored to be a market center that we are top 5 in the nation as far as how many teams we have under one roof. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of people, and I say teams meaning an agent with a single executive assistant, aka a director of ops, or we have teams up to 15, 20 people, right? So when building a team or hiring someone, are there some best practices that you use to ensure you're acquiring great talent, or things that you're making sure that you ask in the interview, or whatever that may be? I know you peaked super early in your career back in like 2008 when you hired this young gun out of Tennessee Tech.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
Today is probably the best hire we've made, and the most devastating loss.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, we have an entire process here at Keller Williams where it's our own assessment of our personality and they match up with the positions, and yet that interview process is crucial. What advice would you give us?
Yeah, so I mean, almost everything in our business will tie back to sort of vision, mission, values, and core value. Vision, mission, strategy, and our core values. And so for our business, our core values are integrity, service, innovation, and drive. And so everybody that a candidate meets in the journey to come aboard with us is being sort of scrutinized and screened against those 4 core values. And so we think about, integrity as a ticket to admission. You sort of don't get in unless you have it. But service, innovation, and drive is what keeps you in the business and helps you succeed. And so everybody, whether it's we take somebody out to lunch, and we do this, and we watch, all of us watch, how does this person treat the wait staff? And I think, and certainly it's a small world, so I'll be very, very careful in how I say this, right? There have been times where I've watched a candidate treat a wait service person poorly, and I hired them anyway and regretted having done so. Oh. I think you can tell an awful lot about somebody based on how they treat somebody who they may perceive to not be at the same station that they are. So we pay attention to that. We don't do it in a vacuum. I think probably like Keller Williams, we have a very robust hiring process. There's most of the time there's some sort of personality profile that's screened against a role. For me, I try to make sure that I don't buy, I try not to hire people like me unless it's for a role like the role I'm in, because I think that's, I think we have to really hire for the role. And I think you obviously know Tony Espinosa, our VP of Ops and HR, and he and Amanda just do a terrific job of sort of interviewing people with those core values in mind and looking for the knowledge, skills, and abilities that match the skill sets that we need in the business. So, I think it's a process for us that's inclusive of a number of folks in the organization, but it starts with those core values and evaluating folks against those.
I love that. Do you have, and I'm sure that throughout the hiring process, depending on the role, right? Throughout the process, they talk to multiple people one-on-one. Do you ever have a time where you defend? Maybe it's somebody you feel, okay, yes, I feel like this would be a good candidate. And then somebody from who has also met them and says, you know what? Here's 1 to 2 things that I'm just going to throw at you just to see what your defense is for that candidate. Do y'all do anything like that?
Yeah, we do. So we'll typically, again, we have a candidate, and so anybody who's a customer-facing person will probably go through a bit more scrutiny than somebody on the operations side, manufacturing or welding or something like that. And so we do, as an executive team, most people will meet these candidates, and we will have those conversations. Say, hey, I really think this person's great, and I think they'd be a terrific resource in the organization. And people come out, they said this during the process that made me really nervous. How do you and sometimes the hiring manager gets the sort of that's the person who has to manage that person and is accountable for that person's performance. So they get sort of 2 votes at the table, but there's a lot of input that comes, there are times we make good hires. There are times, case in point, and there are times where we don't. Sorry, yes, she's gone. Gone. Sorry. That's my office mate. Your first choice for today.
Yeah, first choice. She's just busy. She's in high demand. It is what it is.
Man, there's no doubt.
Go ahead. I'll go ahead.
Yeah. So no, I think that there are ultimately the hiring manager is responsible and accountable for the hire, but that input is certainly welcome. And there are times where we defend, and there are times where the defense is the right defense, and times later on where you're like, I'm not quite so sure I was right.
Right.
I shouldn't have defended.
So, and I think a lot of people resonate with this. Analysis paralysis. Okay. Especially, and I'm the when I first hired my first admin, I was the guy that actually did it irresponsibly, right? I didn't have the reserves. I had the business coming in, and yet I didn't have everything perfect like a lot of people like to do. And I failed forward massively through that. And yet it did set me up for the next journey, the next step in the journey. Mm-hmm. When you think about the hiring process and the analysis of the individual, is there certain times where you're just like, you know what, like, let's give them a shot? Because I do know at the end of the day, a bad hire costs you time, and yet sometimes in some regards, not hiring the person in time costs you money, right?
Yeah, I think it's that balance, right? Your word, analysis paralysis, which I love, is listen, you can't do anything if you don't take some action.
Right.
And oftentimes the easiest thing to do is to do nothing, but it's not going to ever move your business forward. So I think it's if you have a process and you stick to the process, it tends to mitigate that analysis paralysis. And then for me in our business, when we got a sales manager or VP of sales says, hey, I'm going to bring on this resource. I meet the person, I push back, but ultimately, it's you got to turn that decision back over to somebody, and they have to make a decision. And I agree with you. You can wait too long.
Yeah.
You can make a bad hire. I mean, but listen, I don't care how much you analyze a hire. There is no way to mitigate all risk out of a hire. Just right. You can't do it. And so I think you try to find where you mitigate enough risk to make a decision. But you'll never have as much information as you'll have in the 90 days that follow the hire, right?
That's a great point. Yeah. That's a great point, because you can envision this, that, or the other until you actually see it. You could easily talk yourself out of or into good or bad situations. I love that. I'm gonna write a couple notes here real quick. And I think I think I may be blowing you up a little bit on this phone call as far as all the things that I remember.
Yeah.
And please note, guys, I was with Desk Case, I would call it 6 months. And I've known Brian for a long time. However, in a very short period, you can learn who the true leaders are and the influencers in your life, and just really always listen and pay attention. I ask you about the winning for sure. And then I asked you about hiring and, the infrastructure in your company. And you said, sometimes you have to hire talent before you actually have a role for them.
Yeah.
Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that probably comes from, there's this management guy, his name is Balaji Krishnamurthy, and I've gotten the chance to spend a little time with him a couple different times over the years. And he said something to me he said it to me and a group of folks that stuck with me. And he said, and I'm not going to do the Indian, he's from India, so I'm not going to do the Indian accent. But he said, you want to run your business so that when you're recruiting, you get your unfair share of well, first of all, he said, I'm going to make a statement to you that you can't refute. And we're all waiting, with bated breath, because half the world is below average.
Okay.
So what do you do in your hiring process to ensure that you get your unfair share of the above average people? Because I promise you, if you don't, you'll get your fair share of the below average people. So we try to, again, we anchor to those core values, and there are times, as you say, Marcus, and you may have been in the business about the time this happened. There's a guy that worked for a company in an adjacent space to us that, the business was having trouble, and he was let go. And somebody called me, actually I was on vacation, and said, this guy has been let go by this company. I thought, well, and they're like, isn't that terrible? I said, call them up and see if they can come to Nashville and interview with us. And the person was like, what are we going to hire him for? And I said, well, we don't have a role, but he is a thought leader in the industry, and he's got a great mind, and he's a hard worker, and he'd be a great person to have in the organization. So get him in here. And sure enough, we did. It was a great move. So you're right. Sometimes you hire the person and find the place for them, as opposed to having the place and looking for the person. So
I love that. And I remember that guy. I do. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Still with us.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's great.
2008 or 7. So yeah.
That's so cool. All right. So we're hiring people. We've got our team. Or even our allied resources, right? The people that are in business with us to create this experience for our customers all the way through the process. And yet in life and in business and in everywhere, things happen where somebody falls short on what they said they were going to do, their performance, their attitude, whatever it may be. And at KW, we call them fierce conversations. There's also some books out there regarding that. How do you approach tough conversations with employees or fellow leaders when standards aren't being met or culture isn't being enhanced?
Yeah, if I'm being transparent, it's probably, as a leader, is that one of the things I struggle the most with is having. I'm a confrontation averse person by nature, and so it's not easy for me to have those conversations. But what I try to bear in mind is I think about culture in a couple of different ways. And again, this is shaped by this Balaji Krishnamurthy. A culture of loyalties where you're loyal to the person. And if you have somebody that's on your team that's been there 10 years, somebody that's on your team that's been there 2 years, the 2 years a superstar, the 10 years not really pulling their weight anymore. But if you had to let one of them go, you let the superstar go because you're loyal to the person. A culture of opportunity is where you're providing opportunities to people, but you're loyal to the organization. And so and I think Desk Case, when I came aboard, was absolutely a culture of loyalty.
Okay.
And we transitioned the business over the years to a culture of opportunity. And so I say all that to say that one of the ways that I anchor myself in those difficult conversations is to say that although it's a challenging conversation with the individual, I have to have a loyalty to the organization and to the other people in it. And so if there's somebody that's not performing, if I anchor to that they're not being loyal to the organization, and I have to have I anchor to that. So it's not personal at that point. It's like, hey, we're not being loyal to the organization. We're failing the organization, and at some level, I'm failing that person. So I try to anchor to, we have to be loyal to the organization, and then it's your responsibility as a leader to hold that person accountable. So I think try to anchor those way in those ways. I try to again make back to what I've anchored to is this open presence and thoughtfulness is to try to be open-minded, to try to listen, but then try to indicate how that person is not being sort of faithful to what they committed to the organization and to the other people in it, and to try to pivot and paint a different picture of where that of how that has to change. And sometimes it does, and you know this as well as I do, and sometimes it doesn't, right? And then in that case, we get together as a leadership team and say, is this the right person in the wrong seat on the bus, or is this person not on the right bus? And if we move in that direction, then it's always done in a way that's consistent with the core values of the organization. We do it in a way, we've moved lots of people out of the organization over the years, and we do that way that upholds our integrity, that's done with dignity. We do it in times we'll do it, and we'll do things for people that we absolutely know they won't appreciate, and they'll never ever say something good about it, and we do it anyways.
Yeah.
Because it's the right thing to do. So I think it's anchoring to the fact that, I have a loyalty to the organization and all of the people associated with it, including the shareholders and the board and the customers and my fellow teammates. And that makes it easier for me to have those difficult conversations, and a transition to them being open, present, and thoughtful. And more as I get older, more seasoned, whatever you say, I'm probably more direct now than I was. And I think that helps. I think people want you to be that way.
Yes.
Compassionate and thoughtful, but direct and real.
Yeah. Well, direct also can come off as very honest, right?
Yeah.
And I think some people really appreciate that, even though if it hurts a little at first, or for a while, at least they know, right? I love that. And you said it quickly at the beginning. We call it coming from curiosity. Just little taglines. You said always lead and ask questions about the situation, and kind of ease into that conversation, because we don't know what we don't know, right? Maybe there's a factor there that we're unaware of, especially if we're not hands-on with that person daily. So that's great.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Marcus, that many times when I get involved with somebody who doesn't work directly for me, or I get involved with a situation, I still have to show up and ask questions, because I may only have a side of the story, and there's at least two sides to every story, and sometimes three or four, right?
Yeah.
At least. And so I think if I jump into, and I do this sometimes, it's something I always work at, is jumping to a conclusion before I've heard all sides or at least the other side of a story.
Awesome. That's all I've got. And I ask every single person this, and no matter what the setting, no matter what the meeting, what question did I not ask you that I should have?
Well, I would have said that you didn't ask, but you said it, and that's how did we meet? And while Marcus said that, Jody gave him his first job, it was me who was sick and tired of cutting the grass, and that somebody who worked with Jody's son was in that business, and we thought, well, it was an absolute win for me. So we were, I can't think of a question that you haven't asked that you should have, but I think Marcus said that I'm modest, and I've enjoyed, Marcus, watching you over the course of the last several years, and how you build an organization and how you invest in other people comes through, not just in the conversations that we've had over the years over dinner, or at the lake, but sort of in how I see you in your business through the social media, always building somebody else up. And I think that's a credit to your leadership. And I certainly am thankful that you share that with us.
Well, it's all about who was the example. So thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So I would like to do this at the end of every mastermind session that we have. I mean, I've got a whole page of notes here. So guys, I'm going to ask you any questions that you have or ahas from what you were hearing or how it resonated compared to what you heard to your business, because we spoke at length on several different best practices here. I loved how you started out, too good to do any job in this company. You know, you're never too good to do any job, right? So you put your work boots on and get to going. I absolutely love, because it works for me, and yet I had never articulated it. When you're having that rougher day or maybe a challenging day, a day of opportunity, one may say, right? Finding something to anchor you back to something positive, and something maybe you can see a job complete right in front of your eyes, aka hitting the line for a little while, right? Because me and one of our MREAs, his name's Alex Brandow, we talked about when you're having a rough day, you know, the math is easy, right? There's like so many seconds in a day, and 5 minutes right here could ruin a whole day, and yet why? It's only this small portion. So being able to take that bad energy, switch it with an anchoring action and opportunity to then it doesn't affect your next meeting or how you show up for somebody else. So I love that. Open, present, thoughtful. Yes. Meet them where they are. Let's see, here we go. You'll never learn more about a person in their first 90 days. Doesn't matter what you tell me in an interview, right? Or what I think, like, I'm going to find out here soon. And you'd be proud of us. We have an entire plan literally called 30, 60, 90. And
Okay.
it's 30, we check in, 60-day check in, 90, and there's metrics to hit along the way. And I'm sure that Cam, you can attest to this, every one of our agents in the Market Center do this perfectly when they hire, right? We're following up perfectly to this system.
Every day, Marcus, every day.
Every day. Cam runs one of our bigger teams for sure here. So he's seeing this on a daily basis. And then I loved this as well. Culture of loyalty is loyalty to the person. Culture of opportunity gets loyalty to the organization, and you open up opportunities for individuals to grow within that organization. That's huge for me. So Tabs, did you want to share anything, ask anything? What you got? And by the way, Brian, Tabby is our coaching club. Captain. She's our coaching club coach. She leads our coaching club. And I don't know how many agents we've got on there currently. However, they just claimed essentially the #1 spot as far as teams go, even though it's a collection of individual agents. They've already done over 1.4 million in gross commission income for the year. So they're doing great, and Tabby's doing a phenomenal job of leading that. Tabs, what you got?
Well, Brian, first, let me just say I so appreciated hearing about your business. And as Marcus hit all the points that I think I have written down, it ties into Keller Williams and how we run our businesses every day. So it was so enjoyable to hear that from somebody else's perspective that, hey, we might be on the right track from a business model thought perspective. I am curious, what books do you read? That's always my go-to question. What are you reading right now?
Yeah, I don't have a book right now. I like books by Pat Lencioni as a guy that I tend to then, if I'm not reading business journals and news, I like to read Brad Thor and Vince Flynn. I try. A lot of times my reading ends up to be a escape reading, and then most of my reading, business-wise, is online journals, The Economist, things, CNBC, and things like that.
A little bit of Mitch Rapp in your life, huh?
Oh yeah, I try to channel my inner Mitch Rapp whenever I can.
I think we would all love that. That's awesome. Well, Brian, again, Thank you, man. I greatly appreciate your time today. I know it is very valuable. And again, if you can sincerely, if you can put in a good word for me with Jody, I would love to have her on here. And so
I will do that. And if Sam's on the call, I owe Sam. So we owe Sam some answers, and we're working on that. We're working on that. We're making progress with Jody. I'll work a parallel path for you to get her on with you.
I love it. Well, my friend, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Okay.
Enjoy the day. Cheers.
Cheers.